On the first day of third grade, my teacher greeted our class with an icebreaker. With a piece of paper and pen that were placed in front of us, our first game that day was to make a list of our top 3 fears. Most of my third grade peers had shared fears like thunder and lightning, spiders and snakes, and of course, math tests. Yet, I had a rather peculiar combination. My 8-year-old self grabbed the piece of paper and wrote my biggest fears from least to greatest. This is what I wrote. Big head mascots, because you never know who's behind that mask. Stickers, because, they stick. Oh, and, death. Now, over the years, I've quickly learned to leave these fears behind me. Don't worry, I no longer run away when I see the ASB mascot Louis the Lynx around campus, nor do I freak out when there's a sticker on my apple. Well, maybe a little. But death was a fear which proved more difficult to overcome. An apprehension that created a sickening pit in my stomach when I thought about it for too long. The fear of death still found a sneaky way to creep up on me. I was scared of the thought of dealing with the death of loved ones, and I was traumatized when I thought of my own inevitable death. When I was a little kid in elementary school, thoughts about death were just icky. I don't exactly remember when I became self-aware of my mortality per se, but I do remember the early feelings of isolation, complete anxiety and uneasiness that arose when I pondered this newfound realization. I imagined death as a big black void that might swallow me whole in bed one night. I would not know when death would strike, nor how, nor why. But I knew it was out there, waiting for me. I was terrified. And when I looked around at the adults in my life searching for answers and reassurance, no one seemed to worry much about death, and they certainly didn't talk about it. Death was rarely mentioned, and when it was only through sad whispers or vague euphemisms. When I looked at my sister, my mother, my father, my grandmother, all going on about their lives, it seemed to me death wasn't on their top 3 fears list. As a matter of fact, death didn't appear to be a concern for them at all. I felt as if I was missing something. So, I mirrored those around me. I fought against my fear by ignoring it, by pretending that death wasn't going to happen. But I couldn't ignore it. Literally, from the ages of 8 to 12, every single dream of mine would end with death. I would wake up with wet cheeks and a sweaty back. I would have recurring visions of myself drowning, falling off a building, or most frequently getting shot in the head. I know, pretty gnarly, right? But then after waking up in horror and catching my breath, I tried to forget the dream and watch Phineas and Ferb. I continued to ignore the persisting shadow of death. I stopped myself from thinking about it and talking about it with other people, but the fear remained. I felt as if I had to find another way. And maybe there is another way, a better way. Let me ask you a question. Can we think about death in a way that produces anything good, anything beautiful, anything meaningful? To help answer this question, I'd like to conduct a thought experiment with you all tonight. Lay back in your seats or close your eyes if you want to, but I really want you to imagine the scenario. Imagine, if you will, a world without death. Sounds pretty great, right? Okay, now imagine that it's your 68,000th year birthday. For the past thousands of years, you've eaten the same birthday cake, and you've annoyingly heard every single version of the birthday song. And you're sitting there at the table, and while looking up those 68,000 candles on your cake, you start to think back on your life. And you think, I've roamed every corner of this earth, met every person there is to meet, felt every emotion a soul has to offer, eaten every type of food, danced to every type of song, played every sport. And I've done that 10 times by now. Now what? What's left? As Franz Kafka once said, the meaning of life is that it stops. When I thought about it this way, I realized that the very reason why life is so precious is precisely because it's so rare, so limited, so finite. Those times when you're basking in the sun or feeling the breeze on your face, those times when you're eating your favorite food or listening to your favorite song, hugging your favorite person, those moments are only experienced a limited amount of times. And then at some point, it ends. I began to come to a new realization that the limited nature of life is what makes these experiences so very special. Death can push us to celebrate and acknowledge life. Instead of thinking of death as something to be feared or ignored, I now think of death like putting on a pair of glasses that force me to view life under a new and crystal clear lens, in which I can see every little thing in this world, big or small, pretty or ugly, as valuable and unique, because I never know when or if I'll experience it again. Changing the way we think of death might as well be that perspective shift that is needed to live a fulfilling life. The way man thinks about life is the way we attribute meaning to it. Choosing to think about things differently can be a rather small change, but that can fundamentally reform our lives. This is an idea as early as the Holocaust with Viktor Frankl, who managed to deal with the horrors of genocide. He founded the term logotherapy, which is a theory based on the premise that an individual's primary motivational force is to find meaning in life. A form of therapy that relies on our manipulation of logos, or in other words, form of thinking. Frankl came to the conclusion that he had the capacity to choose where he found meaning within experience by alternating his frame of mind. Thinking about death is a form of thinking about reality in a manner that is inspiring or even empowering. Because when we choose to think about death, it can give us meaning to our lives. My mortality urges me to reflect on my own life by asking questions like, what do you value? Where do you find happiness? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? It can be something as simple as playing a board game with my family. But knowing I'm the architect of my own limited time forces me to make tough decisions. The promise of death forces me to truly value my limited time on earth and ensures that I become the very best version of myself. And who knows? Maybe the clarity that comes with contemplating death is what prompted me to take the necessary risks that have defined my life. Just like my younger self, the Western world seems to struggle with this idea of embracing death head on. According to Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a Swiss death counselor, death remains the last and greatest taboo of Western society. In the West, we want to separate birth, life, and death, addressing them individually, missing the fact that they're all intertwined. Just look at the way we handle our deceased. We still manage to avoid death when faced with the most explicit form of our demise. In Western culture, our death traditions often center around chemical embalming, followed by a burial at the local cemetery, or most recently, cremation. The burial process is made up of 3 stages: protection, sanitation, and beautification. Protection refers to putting a corpse in a metal or wooden casket so the body has no contact with the earth. Sanitation refers to chemically preserving the human form by which all the blood of the corpse is drained and replaced with formaldehyde. And finally, the body is beautified. They'll put the body in a suit and makeup. They'll inject dye so the person appears more alive. No, not dead, but simply just resting. Not only is the process of chemical embalming totally unnatural, it directly represents our attitudes towards the end of life. even confronted with the most literal symbol of death, we still manage to artificially create an illusion of reality. Through these traditions, we ignore the natural beauty in death, the natural beauty in decay. Westerners might learn a thing or two from other cultures about how to think about death. In the mountains of eastern Indonesia, for the Tadoja people, the most important social and cultural moment in their lives are not births, weddings, family dinners, but funerals. The Tadoja create a culture around death in which grieving loved ones is not so much of a private sadness, but a publicly shared social process. Their elaborate funeral ceremonies blur the lines between the living and the dead, because a person isn't declared dead until the funeral ceremony, which, because of the expense, can take years to occur. In the meantime, the dead are kept in the house and are symbolically fed and cared for by their families, until the funeral ceremony, which finally assists the soul in its transition to Puya, the land of spirits. In Mexico, the corpses of Mexican loved ones are not kept physically inside the house, but they are remembered and celebrated every year on the Day of the Dead by creating ofrendas in their houses, small altars of remembrance, which include flowers, candles, photos, and even the favorite foods of the deceased. The dead are gone, yet they remain a part of the ongoing memory of the family. In Tibet, some communities practice something called sky funerals, which is a ritual where the bodies of their dead relatives are laid out on the side of a mountain for hordes of vultures to come and eat, while monks recite Buddhist chants. For them, the body is but a vessel that is being returned back to where it came from, to nature. So maybe these other cultures are onto something. Now, I'm not insinuating that you should keep your grandfather's body in the guest room, but I am suggesting that we let death into our homes, and that we embrace the natural process of death. Rather than fear death, perhaps we should sit down with death and maybe have a cup of coffee with it, or even play a game of chess with it. Keeping the door open to the uncomfortable, to the uneasy, to the unknown is an opportunity to grow and learn about ourselves. By accepting death, we can find in it beauty, dignity, and even laughter. Take Amy Krauss Rosenthal, who wrote in 2017 an article published in the New York Times Modern Love column titled, "You May Want to Marry My Husband." Amy died from ovarian cancer just 10 days after its publication. Her touching and heartbreaking, yet incredibly funny essay was essentially giving her husband the blessing to find love and joy after her death. She reflected on her life with gratitude, accepting the reality of her demise with open arms and a sense of humor. She did not ignore death, but she did the opposite. She did what I aspire to do. As I think back on my own last moments on Earth, I'm taken back to that third grade list. I think back to that little girl who refused to go to Disneyland, who would get annoyed when her friends would put stickers on her, and the girl who was utterly and completely terrified of her own mortality. Though I'm not nearly as frightened of death as my younger self, I still sometimes get that pit in my stomach when I think about the end of life. Death still makes me feel vulnerable. I'm still scared of dealing with the death of loved ones, and I'm still wary of my own death. My fear will never really leave, but I've learned that I have the power to control how to interact with death. So now, when the image of a big black void creeps up on me again, trying to swallow me whole, I try to push myself into it with a new understanding, an attempt to embrace the calm within that darkness and become familiar with the unknown. Because death, I found, can give us the inspiration to live. So I now do my best to find beauty in the death that awaits me. Indeed, in the death that awaits us all. Thank you.